Hello and welcome to the Masters Swimming Podcast, available on all major podcast platforms and in video format on YouTube. I am Joe Malone, and this week it's an absolute pleasure to welcome to the podcast Brett Hawke. Listen, Brett needs no introduction, but as it's good manners, he represented Australia at the 2000 and 2004 Olympic Games. Is a five-time Australian national champion and record holder in the 50 metres freestyle. After retirement, Brett coached some of the fastest swimmers in the world, heading up Auburn Tigers, and is now host of the #1 swimming podcast, Inside with Brett Hawke. Do give it a listen. It's a really good show. So first of all, Brett, welcome to the podcast. And how does it feel to be on the other side of the mic for this one?
Yeah, it's strange. I appreciate it, Joe. Thanks for having me, mate. I think telling swimming stories is fun, and I've enjoyed it for the past almost 3 years now, getting to share other people's stories. So I certainly have my own, and I do think that every time I tell my story, I remember something different of my past and what has transpired and how I got here. So I think I try and make every one of these conversations unique in that, everybody's got so much to share, and I'm just glad that people are interested in me sharing my story.
Talking about that storytelling, you've been in the swimming game for so many years now, and yet the enthusiasm that comes across from you on your podcast is amazing. Have you ever had a break from the sport? Like when you retired from competing, did you stop before you coached?
No, actually, I went straight into it. I was actually scheduled to go back to school and finish my degree because I actually never finished my degree up to that point. I went and tried out for the Sydney Olympics in 2000, so I had to cut my degree short early. And I knew the only way I was going to make that team in 2000 was to really go home and focus in and spend a year kind of preparing myself to make that team, which I did, which then put my academics on hold. So as soon as I finished competing in 2006, I went immediately straight back to college in America. And as soon as I got there, one of the coaches, unfortunately, was diagnosed with cancer. So it all happened very rapidly where I went back to study and I kind of got invited into coaching just as a fill-in for somebody that was sick. And then, boom, that's where it all began.
Amazing. You turned pro in your early 20s. Is that right?
Yeah, I guess pro is a word that is thrown around a lot, right? Like what does pro actually mean in swimming? And I guess for me, it was really, and I want this point to be driven home to a lot of people. For me, it was more about a mentality than it was me making any type of money, right? Like for me to be a pro athlete meant that I was standing alone as somebody that wanted to achieve certain things. And in order to do that, I had to make certain sacrifices and do certain things and have certain commitments to that. It didn't mean that somebody was actually paying me money. Whether you're being paid $100 a week or $1 million a week, the attitude and the mentality should be the same, is that you're preparing yourself to be the best athlete you can be. So ultimately, yes, after college, after my 3-year stint in college, I realized that I needed to elevate my game, whether I was going to get paid or not. If I wanted to get paid and if I wanted to be a swimmer who traveled the world and got to compete, especially in the 50 freestyle, I needed to be at my best all the time. And so I needed to prepare to be at my best. So that was the mentality I adopted early, to say, hey, I am going to be the best athlete I can be, which means I want to be one of the best in the world. And in order to be one of the best in the world, hopefully, then that means someone will pay me to do that eventually. And that's kind of what happened. So I left college at the age of 23 and basically made my first Olympic team at the age of 25, and just spent that time really honing my craft. And that was actually the first open Australian swimming team that I ever made, was at the age of 25.
Wow. You said that you adopted that mentality early on. What are we talking, like teenage years here? Like at what point were you like, I am so serious about this, and I want to give this everything?
Yeah, look, that's a great question too. I think there was levels, right? Like at the age of 17, when I finished high school, I realized I loved swimming, and I was still growing. I was still learning. I was still growing physically too, and emotionally. I wasn't a man yet, really. I was just a teenage boy, and I didn't want to give it up then. And so I realized, in order to then make the next step from just an average high school swimmer, because honestly, I was probably about the fourth or fifth best swimmer in my high school at the time. I did go to a very good school in Sydney, Australia, where we had good swimming, but I wasn't the best. And I realized, in order to continue swimming, if I wanted to do that, and if I wanted to get my parents' approval and support, then I needed to take the next step forward. So I got in the gym, I got stronger, I dedicated myself, I got a personal trainer in the gym. I started to look at workouts differently, attack workouts differently, and really start to level up my game. And probably what I did at that point in time is I probably went too far the other way. Like I pushed into the barrier of really trying to discover my limits. And in doing that, I probably got too strong. I probably worked too hard at that point, where I even worked myself into some sickness where I wasn't a healthy athlete. I wasn't finding the balance. I just went in as hard as I could, and I just didn't understand. But that was a necessary evil for me. I needed to go through that in order to learn. And I don't look back on that with any regrets, but it wasn't my most productive years in terms of my performances. It was more of, I was learning about myself and what my limits were.
That is really interesting. Actually, I get the impression just from listening to your podcast over the last few years that you've talked to other athletes that perhaps had a similar mentality, and it's all about the feeling of just working incredibly hard is what you need just to feel like you're getting somewhere. Whereas other swimmers, it's more about drills and skills. It's more about feeling in that flow. And so it's a really interesting kind of debate, really, in terms of what is best for each person, because it's not just about what's best physically. It's about what's actually working for you mentally, whether you feel like you're making it.
Yeah, I found that, look, when you're 13, 14, 15, you're comparing yourself to everybody else at 13, 14, 15 and beyond, right? Like, there's a lot of comparisons of where you're at that particular age. And I found there was just so many discrepancies between the level of maturity and development of certain people, right? Like, I was a very immature, young 13, 14, 15-year-old. I was underdeveloped. I wasn't physically where I would be later in life. And so I was just not on a level playing field. And so I just wasn't very good. And I couldn't compete with guys that were stronger than me, had more experience than me, that were more emotionally developed, mentally developed. I couldn't compete, and it was a struggle. And it was around that time where I started to have doubts of, like, is this for me? Should I continue with this? Am I any good at this? Why am I doing this? And, every kid goes through that, and you get to a point where you're like, well, you start to select, where am I putting my energies and my time, and why am I doing it? Why am I getting out of bed at 4 o'clock in the morning, right? And so I played rugby, I ran track, I surfed, I did other things. And it was around that time where I had to start to make those decisions of, like, okay, what do I really value here? Swimming was the thing that I was drawn to the most, that gave me the most satisfaction. It challenged me the most. It gave me the most pleasure. And so I really decided around 16 to kind of put all my energies into that. And that was a commitment that I needed to make. But then it wasn't till around the age of about 20 where really that commitment started to pay off. And I started to then be nationally recognized as one of the fastest swimmers in the country.
I mean, I have to say, if you started to adopt that mentality from 16 and then you made your first Olympic team at 25, that's 9 years of graft. So fair play for sticking at it. To make your first team at 25, is that unusual? Do people tend to make it early, or is that quite a common thing?
Well, it doesn't tell the full story, because I did miss the Olympic team in '96 at the age of 20. And that was a real turning point again. I'd put a lot of time and energy into trying to be an Olympian, and I failed the first time round. And I was sitting at home watching the Olympics in '96, and people that I either thought I was as good as, or didn't train as hard as me, or maybe didn't deserve to be there. Whatever it was, they were there and I wasn't. And I realized that, hey, I have the potential to do this. I didn't figure it out. And so
Yeah.
I decided at that point to go to America and take up a scholarship to swim and study, because I couldn't swim and study in Australia at the same time. I was basically wasting my life away to try and follow this Olympic dream, which had just failed. And I thought to myself, well, I still want that. I still have that dream. I still believe I'm capable. But that's 4 years away. And if I don't do something in the interim, I'm going to be a complete waste. And so I decided to go to America. And that's really where my life changed. From the age of kind of 21 to 23, I swam with David Marsh at Auburn University. I was surrounded by some of the best swimmers in the world. I really just got lucky. I struck gold. It's one of those things where you wake up, you go for a walk with your dog one day, and you find a bag of $1 million sitting on the sidewalk, and you think I was just the luckiest man on earth to fall into that position at that particular time. It was fate. I don't know. I can't explain it any other way. I didn't look at any other schools. I went straight to Auburn. They recruited me. I fell into a team that was the second best in the country at the time. They'd never won a national championship. I come along, and my performance immediately, as soon as I get there, my level of performance just elevated. I just got better immediately as soon as I walked in the door. And honestly, I had success straight off the bat. I was a national champion in the 50 freestyle my freshman year in college. Our team won 4 out of the 5 relays at the NCAA championships. I was on those relays, and we broke the NCAA records in all of the relays. Our team won the national championship for the first time. I mean, it couldn't have gone any better for me going to America. And what I learned from that process was, now I was ready to be an Olympian. So over the 3 years of me learning and taking it all in and developing, I came back, and I knew I was ready to be. I knew I was ready to take that Olympic run and be ready to be an Olympian in 2000 for sure.
That's really cool. And by the way, you said you got really lucky. But I'm personally a believer in you make your own luck. So I'm sure all of the hard work that you did that's why it kind of fell for you. Which is
an interesting story with that. I'll tell you this. You say you make your own luck. I actually did lie to my father. I told my father they offered me a full scholarship to come to America. I've told this story a few times. So in terms of making your own luck, I realized there was an opportunity here that I couldn't pass up. So I lied to him, and I said, Dad, they offered me a full scholarship. You don't have to pay for anything. And as soon as I get there, he starts getting bills in the mail, for thousands of dollars. And he called me. He said, Brett, what's happening? And I told him. I had to confess. I said, Dad, I lied because I could not pass up this opportunity to go. I need to stay here. He said, I'm going to give you 2 months. If you aren't successful in 2 months, you're coming home. And so I told David Marsh, the head coach, I said, David, in 2 months from now, when I win a national championship and we win a team title, you need to put me on a full scholarship or I'm going home. And he said, okay, deal. You win, and I'll do that. So I won, and we won, and he held good to his word. He put me on a full scholarship. So my dad paid a few $1,000s initially, but I'll tell you, I was going to be on the first plane home if that didn't happen.
I love that. That's a great story. So all of those years then of competing, on the biggest stage, all the biggest races. What's your greatest race? The race that if you could live that day again, that race again, what would it be?
Well, look, everybody dreams to be in the Olympic final. It's funny, actually. I'm packing up my house. I told you I'm moving to Boston soon, but I've been packing up. But I actually have Bruno Fratis's bronze medal here from the Olympics. And look, everybody dreams of this, right? Everybody dreams of being on the Olympic podium. It never happened for me as an athlete. I got to the Olympic final. I was in lane 5. I qualified second fastest. So I put myself in the mix. And I finished 6th. It didn't happen. I didn't win the medal, but by putting myself in that situation, I was regarded at that point in time as one of the fastest swimmers on the planet. And that was okay with me. That's where I wanted to be. I wanted to be regarded as, I wanted to be respected as one of the fastest men on earth. And I got there. I didn't get the medal, so what am I going to do? I'm going to beat myself up for the rest of my life? I just didn't choose to take that attitude. I choose to look at it as a positive. I came back, and I've coached some of the fastest swimmers in history. I've coached world record holders, Olympic champions. So I feel like everything I learned in the process, I was able to then pass on to the next generation and help them become ultimately successful. So I'm very proud of the fact that I swam in that Olympic final. I replay that race in my head many times of what I could do better, or maybe now as a coach, what I would have trained to do better. Like I think even training has evolved since then. So like, yeah, you look at it and you say, wow, I could have done this and that and that. But look, the result is the result. But swimming in that Olympic final, I'll never forget walking out into the stadium in Athens. It was an open stadium, outdoor stadium. You got 15,000 people in the stands. It's live across the world, millions of people watching. You walk out in your Australian colours. I mean, mate, there's nothing better than that. That's the ultimate, you know what I mean?
Yeah, totally agree. I can only imagine what that must feel like. Just before we move on to the coaching, just one more thing I want to touch on. It's just what you said there about, the mentality. Well, you touched on the mentality already and making it to the biggest stage. This is the Master Swimming podcast. The audience is predominantly master swimmers. There are a few swimmers who, used to swim at the highest level that go on to be master swimmers. Is that something that have you seen that often with people? Have you ever seen people that you've maybe coached or teammates that you've had that have finished competing, on the high stage and then go on to just compete for fun?
Yeah, I mean, you say fun, but I meet a lot of master swimmers that are very serious. Like it's fun for sure. They love it, but they're very serious about it. And I never wanted to make a joke of master swimming. I think it's a very serious endeavor. And there are a lot of people that dedicate a lot of time and energy to it to be great. And I always said to myself, if I'm not prepared to do that, don't go in there and make a mockery of it. I don't want to be that person. Now, there might be other people that do it for fun, for sure, great. But like, it's a competitive situation and people do take it seriously, and there's world records and there's world championships and national championships. And so I've never been lured into the fun side of it. I've often been asked to come into the competitive side of it. I just said, I'm not there. Like I'm not prepared to put that time and energy into doing it properly. I think ultimately I could, but I haven't, and I haven't done that side of it. But yeah, I mean, master swimming is incredible, and it's got really good people in it, and they do take it seriously, and I appreciate that fact because it's a beautiful sport. But it's one of those sports that you can't do it halfway. You can't cheat the system. Like the swimming is the swimming, the work is the work. If you do the work, you get the results ultimately. And I've just never been prepared to take that step into master swimming just yet.
No, but I think if you've put years and years in to all the training and the lifestyle to kind of carry that on, is kind of has to come to the end at some point. That moves us on to coaching. Then you mentioned earlier that you got the opportunity to sort of take on coaching pretty much straight away. I mean, you were with the Auburn Tigers for a long time, 2006 to 2018, I believe. So yeah. Did you have swimmers? Did you see swimmers right from the start of their career right through to the end?
Yeah, I mean, we had kids that came in as freshmen, right? So they're 17, 18 years old, and they go all the way through to the professional ranks, right? And then we had others who came in as professionals that were looking for something new and different and exciting. And that's where I was able to kind of rewrite the way that sprinting was really approached and trained, right? Like, for me, it was almost a blank canvas where I came in and David Marsh said to me at the time, Brett, here's your athletes, do what you want with them. And I was like, great, he's given me a blank slate here. I can do whatever I want. So often I would walk in and I would use the pool and the surroundings as inspiration of like, what do I want to do today? How do I want to do it? What type of environment do I want to create? I didn't want to be the type of coach or the type of environment where they just walked in, they put their bags down, they swam laps up and down the pool, and they got out and left. I was not interested in that at all. I was interested in creating an exciting environment where athletes would run in, they would strip off, they would say, let's get great today, and they would make each other better, and we would walk off the deck exhausted thinking, what did we just do? That was incredible. How do we replicate that again? Like I wanted that type of environment where it was, where they were desperate to be part of that group and what we were doing. And that's what we ended up having. We had a group of people that we made it so much fun, exciting, and new. And we really evolved the sport. We really evolved sprinting and the way it was approached. I look at sprint programs now, and everybody's doing what I was doing 15, 16 years ago with the team. It's just kind of common practice now, and that makes me feel good,
No, definitely. Did you've coached some of the fastest swimmers, obviously, most notably probably Cesar Cielo, obviously Bruno Fratus at the moment. But was there anybody that you coached that wasn't necessarily, an Olympic finalist, but you're just so proud of what they achieved, even if it wasn't all the medals?
Oh, wow. I mean, yeah, there's a bunch of people. I mean, I coached men and women. I was very fortunate to coach everybody in sprinting at that stage. Look, honestly, I've said this maybe before, but like one of the proudest achievements I've had is coaching a young girl from the Bahamas. Her name's Ariana Vanderpool Wallace. She's from the Bahamas. We went and I represented the Bahamas in 2012 at the Olympics, right? So the whole Olympic team for the Bahamas, there was 27 athletes. That was the whole Olympic team. 26 of them ran track. Wow. 26 ran track. They were all on the track. One of them swam in the pool, and that was it. There was no basketball team. There was no nothing else. It was 26 track athletes and one swimmer. And we went, and she made the final of the 50 freestyle, right? Like having no support, no backing, no nothing. It was just me and her and a massage therapist, and we're taking on the whole world. And this girl basically did what I did. I was supported by this huge Australian swim team. We had everything that you could possibly imagine, and I made the final in the 50 free. This girl has nothing, and no one's ever done it in the history of her country before where they've made the final. And she made the final in the fastest sprint event on the books, the 50 freestyle. I mean, to me, it's just really the proudest moment I had coaching. She didn't win a medal. She finished 8th. But I tell you what, and the other thing is she was 5'5". I mean, she's a tiny little girl. I mean, tiny. I mean, she was strong. Don't get me wrong. She was strong, but tiny little girl. She walked in a room. She's 5'5". The other girl she's racing is 6 foot, 6'1", 6 foot. Big girls. And yeah, definitely the proudest moment I had as a coach for sure.
That's really cool. You also mentioned that you wanted to create an environment at Auburn where people were running in, were stripping off. You wanted to make it fun, exciting. In terms of personalities, I've heard you talk on your podcast, and people have said things of you that you were always this really enthusiastic, quite pumped up swimmer. What sort of personality do you like to coach? I mean, do you like a variety of personalities, or do you prefer seeing a young you almost walk through the door like, come on, I'm going to go and get this today?
I didn't ask a lot of questions when I swam. And I think maybe that was to my detriment. I was more of like, tell me what to do and I'll do it. I enjoyed coaching athletes that asked questions, that were inquisitive, that wanted to learn, that wanted to get better. I wanted them to ultimately, 4 years into coaching them, I wanted them to know as much as I knew. I didn't want to be standing over them for 4 years. I wanted them to be able to walk away and say, I could now go and do exactly what you do and coach an Olympic champion or an Olympic athlete. So that was my goal, is to really inform them, to give them a deep understanding of what we're doing, why we're doing it, how we're doing it, get them to even create. Sometimes I'd say to them, hey guys, I want you to come up with the main set today. Tell me what you want to do, how you want to do it, and I'll run it for you and we can do it. So we would do things like that where I really got them to think about what they were doing, create new drills. Guys, let's create some drills today. Let's figure out what we're doing in the water and just come up with some fun stuff. Some of it will work, some of it won't, but let's do some stuff and give me feedback. So I was more into the type of athlete that wanted to interact. I did really well with them. The ones that were more like me, in fact, I had them, they would sometimes come back to me and say, oh, you never really liked me. You didn't favor me as much as this person or that person. And I would always say to them, well, they asked more questions. They gave me more feedback. Like, I was able to connect with them more because that's what I wanted. The ones that really just wanted to be told what to do, I didn't really connect with them as much. So I wouldn't say that every single person I ever coached would say Brett was the greatest coach on earth. And I didn't want people to have that myth either. You know, people would say, oh, we've got the best sprint coach on earth. And I would say, look, I'm only as good as you are. You know, like, I can only be as good as you are. And so we can work together to try and get better collectively. But if you're not giving me anything back, I can't help you as much as I could help somebody else, you know?
I completely agree. I mean, I've never coached before, but I can imagine that having that two-way relationship is vital, because if it's always one way for a long, long time, it starts to become a bit robotic in a way. So actually, I can totally see your point of view there. So now we're sort of talking about coaching. Obviously, as you know, this is a Masters podcast. We certainly in this country, on average, we probably swim 3, 4, 5 sessions a week at most, probably. Again, 3 to 5 hours. I really enjoy watching your Instagram content, and obviously we'll talk about any questions soon. But the things that you put on there, I find that really fascinating in terms of my own swimming. If you were coaching, me or another master swimmer that just swims, 3 or 4 sessions a week, how would you most effectively coach? Or how would you coach me in terms of getting the best out of me? Would you think, okay, it's about getting as much volume in that time, or would you really hammer home the drills and skills? And because I know I love watching all of your Instagram stories on the sculling seems to be something that you really enjoy getting your swimmers to do, that feel for the water.
Yeah, well, look, I was very fortunate to fall into a situation where a very famous young singer by the name of Cody Simpson reached out to me and asked me if I would take him on and coach him. And so he was basically coming from no background. He hadn't swum in 10 years. So we basically had to start from scratch. So it really challenged my thinking here, kind of like the same question you're asking. If I've only got a certain amount of time, what could I do? And so what I wanted to do is all those things that you just said. Do I want them to improve their skill level? Yes. Do I want them to improve their endurance? Yes. Do I want them to learn how to deal with pain? Because that's part of not only training but racing. Yes. Do I want them to, become better racers? Yes. We're going to have to learn to race in practice. So, like, when you look at it, it's like, what are you trying to do? Ultimately, is like, what are you trying to do? And that's what I would ask any master swimmer is, if your ultimate aim is to just have fun as a master swimmer, then we can just have fun in practice and do fun things, and those things will get you better, but you'll want to come to practice. If your aim is to be the best master swimmer in the world, which is some people, they have that aim, then what do we have to do to be the best master swimmer in the world? What I always did with my athletes is break it down into, what do you want? What do you want? I can't tell you what I want. You just tell me what you want. Do you just want to be fit and healthy? Then let's be fit and healthy. Do you want to be at 10% body fat and stronger than you were at the age of 20 and now you're 45 years old? Then let's do that. But I would always ask them, what do they want and how can we get there? And then you break it down. So if you've got a short amount of time, you try and do a little bit of everything you need, right? So we would do shorter warm-ups. We would do skill acquisition early on in warm-ups. We would then go into some sort of base training of some sort. Then we'd go into some race pace training. And then at the end, to deal with pain and agony, I might hit him with a surprise and say, hey, let's do a 200 butterfly for time, and just test his mental fortitude, right? So I would do all those things. And you can squeeze them in 5 hours a week. You can get it all in. You might have to do smaller bites of it, but you can certainly get everything you need in 5 hours a week for sure.
Yeah, interesting. So I mentioned the videos of the sculling drills that you enjoy doing. What are some of the favorite drills that you like getting your athletes to do?
Oh man, we would do drills. I love doing drills with equipment, right? Like, yeah, I would put equipment on people and say, let's figure out how to do something with this, right? Like I created this drill where we would take a kickboard and we would would press on the kickboard. So we would have some sort of press, so that basically it's almost like you're pressing on the water, right? And then you would have another hand up here, so you'd add sort of weight on the body. So you'd have to really engage the core. You're pressing, you're engaging the core, you're adding weight, and then maybe you lift one leg out of the water and you kick with the other leg, right? So there's some coordination in there as well. So like, I'm always finding ways that I could put pressure on different parts of the body, increase coordination, increase feel for the water, increase power. So it's like, whatever you're trying to develop, you can find a drill for it, you can find a skill for it, and get creative, get fun. And again, sometimes they work, sometimes they don't. Like, feel for the water. You might swim with tennis balls. You might do some sculling drills with tennis balls. You might do some fast pace work with tennis balls. And then you drop the tennis balls and your hands feel like paddles. Your hands feel gigantic. All of a sudden, you take these feel away and then you add it. It's amazing what it can do. So it's like, we would do things like that. We would actually add, I would add, I would add some sort of stocking to their forearm, so it would take the sensation away of feeling the water on their forearm, and then you take the stocking off, and then you would get them, and they would feel the sensation of feeling the water on their forearm and their paddle. So just always experimenting, trying new things, and playing with different types of equipment. That was always the most fun for me,
Yeah, that does sound fun. I feel like that's something I need to bring into my training a bit more, actually, is just having that fun with equipment and just coming up with creative ideas. Yeah. It just sprung a thought, actually, when you were saying that about, David Popovich. Obviously, I think, as the story goes, he spent, was it 2 hours or something the day before just sculling before his world record that he set in the 100. I mean, that I would never think to do that. That's incredible.
Yeah. Look, sculling is great in order for feel, and I guess the best swimmers that I've ever seen, Anthony Irvin, David Popovich, even Alex Popov back in the day, they would spend a lot of time sculling, and I think the more you do it, the better you get at it, and the more you realize that it's important, because a lot of times in sprinting, we want to go as fast as we possibly can, but you can't swim fast unless you're holding water. Right, like I can move my arms as fast as I want in the pool, but I'll slip water. So unless you're actually holding water while swimming as fast as you can, then you're very inefficient, right? Excuse me. So holding water while swimming at speed is the most important thing. So the first thing you need to do is learn how to swim slow, I think, in the right, correct body position. Swimming slow is vital. It's almost like a baby learning to run, right? They start with a crawl, they move to standing upright and walking, and then they go into a little jog, and then they learn to sprint, and then they learn to run type things. So it's like, to me, there's progressions of feeling the water into full speed swimming, right? You start slow, you go full speed, but the objective is to hold water at every different speed that you're progressing to. So that's why we do it.
Yeah, no, I find all of this really fascinating. And actually, as you were talking there, I almost felt like I was watching your videos on Any Question. Yeah. I know that you work for them full time now, and it's a brilliant platform for anybody who enjoys swimming. But for somebody like me who's never really been around the elite swimmers before, there's so many things I've not done as a swimmer, so many things I've not thought about as a swimmer. In terms of you working for them now, is this your new way of kind of telling the story of swimming and of helping people out?
Yeah, this is my new life passion, is to really, we've found a way now to break down all of our knowledge and experience. So everybody has knowledge and experience, but these elite level swimmers and coaches are now coming onto this platform, and they're answering questions in short video format. So they're able to then intellectualize really basic and complex type questions, where they can break it down into their own thoughts and experiences and knowledge. And so for me, it's like almost like writing a book, where you're writing chapters in a book, and I get to come in and I get to create my own chapter of a book based on every single question that's been asked to me, and it's been recorded. So when you go onto the Any Question app and you look at my profile, I've got over 750 answers on that platform. So it's like almost like a little mini podcast of my life. Like I'm doing a large podcast with you here, but like this is kind of like broken up into sections, and I can go back and say, oh wow, that's amazing. I've learned. I can express that and share that knowledge so simply now, and record it, and then I can share it out with the world, because I get these questions all the time, constantly. So now I just take that link, send it out, and I say, here's my answer to that question. But hey, if you come into the app, now you'll get Bob Bowman, now you'll get Caleb Dressel, now you get all these other people answering the same question, and you can get their knowledge and experience too. So man, I'm really loving the app for that reason, and I think it's a great platform. I think all swimmers and coaches should be on there learning for sure.
Yeah, I think it's a great app too, and I have to say, genuinely, there are sets and sessions that I have done on the back of watching the likes of yourself and the likes of James Gibson and Mel Marshall, Bob Bowman, given their brilliant knowledge. I think it's so good. I think everybody should check it out if you're a keen swimmer. Any questions, the app, do download it. It's brilliant. Just finally then, inside with Brett Hawke, you've been doing it 3 years. You have spoken to some of the very, very best swimmers, past and present, some of the very best coaches, past and present. And I know you are kind of evolving into other sports now if they've got some sort of a swimming background. But in terms of that storytelling element, do you feel as though, from a personal point of view, this is your way now of being able to really reach so many people, as opposed to just being on the pool deck or being an Olympian with your own teammates?
Yeah, well, the thing that I love about looking back too is, like, I feel like I'm documenting history, right? Like, in the past 3 years, we've lost some really high-level people in the sport of swimming, and I haven't had a chance to sit and talk and record them, and it's been really devastating to me. Like, oh man, I missed a chance to talk to Gennady Turetsky, like one of the most incredible men who's ever picked up a stopwatch and taught. And I mean, there was so much to learn from that man. Don Talbot, who was the head coach of Australian swimming for many years. I mean, I just regret not talking to him. And so, like, now when I look back and I see the people I have recorded and I have spoken to, I say, well, at least I've got that forever. Like, that will never go away now. So if anything ever happens to me or them, there's a piece of documented history and their stories being told, and part of their knowledge has been recorded. So I love that aspect, that I feel like I've given swimming something back. A lot of my work was in the past where I did things and was like, well, I did that back then. Now I feel like my work is timeless, because I've got this recorded, documented piece of evidence to say, hey, this person sat down with me. Like Dean Boxall, who's one of the greatest coaches in the world, sat down with me after the Olympics in Tokyo and gave me, 2.5 hours of his time. People are constantly coming back to that recording and saying, that's the greatest swimming interview I've ever seen. I mean, it's just so intense and so thoughtful and open and honest and raw. And that's recorded history. Like, that'll never disappear. So I love that aspect of what I'm doing, and that's why I continue to do it. I have not left swimming at all completely. I love the swimming world, and so I want to stay in it and continue to tell as many stories as I can.
Yeah, well, I mean, I certainly enjoy it, and everybody does, I'm sure. It's fantastic that you've achieved so much in the sport, but now you're giving back in that storytelling where you're sharing all of your knowledge. You're making sure that other people are coming on and sharing their knowledge too. It's really, really beneficial for people like me and lots of other people, but it's also just fun. It's entertaining. I like the way you do it. Do check out Inside with Brett Hawke. Do check out Any Question. It's a brilliant app. Honestly, it's nice and quick and easy as well, which is, it's almost like two ends of the extreme in terms of the two channels that you put out there now. Listen, it was a really, really interesting chat. I really appreciate you coming on. I know you're in the middle of moving house. I hope the move goes well. And it was great to talk to you.
Thanks, Joe. Appreciate it, mate. Yeah, I'm headed to Boston, so I'll pick up, and people will start to see me in Boston from now on. That's where I'm headed. That's where Any Question is based, and I'm really looking forward to this new chapter in my life, to get out there and see if we can build this company to something pretty extraordinary, and very excited about it. So, hey, Joe, thanks for having me on, mate.
You're welcome. Cheers.
All right. Take care.